England is a country that is part of the United Kingdom. It shares land borders with Scotland to the north and Wales to the west. The Irish Sea lies northwest of England and the Celtic Sea lies to the southwest. England is separated from continental Europe by the North Sea to the east and the English Channel to the south. The country covers much of the central and southern part of the island of Great Britain, which lies in the North Atlantic, and includes over 100 smaller islands such as the Isles of Scilly and the Isle of Wight. The area now called England was first inhabited by modern humans during the Upper Paleolithic period, but takes its name from the Angles, one of the Germanic tribes who settled during the 5th and 6th centuries. England became a unified state in the 10th century, and since the Age of Discovery, which began during the 15th century, has had a significant cultural and legal impact on the wider world. The English language, the Anglican Church, and English law, the basis for the common law legal systems of many other countries around the world, developed in England, and the country's parliamentary system of government has been widely adopted by other nations. The Industrial Revolution began in 18th century England, transforming its society into the world's first industrialized nation. England's terrain mostly comprises low hills and plains, especially in central and southern England. However, there are uplands in the north and in the southwest. The capital is London, which is the largest metropolitan area in both the United Kingdom and the European Union. England's population of over 53 million comprises 84% of the population of the United Kingdom, largely concentrated around London, the southeast, and conurbations in the Midlands, the northwest, the northeast, and Yorkshire, which each developed as major industrial regions during the 19th century. The Kingdom of England, which after 1535 included Wales, ceased being a separate sovereign state on the 1st of May 1707, when the Acts of Union put into effect the terms agreed in the Treaty of Union the previous year, resulting in a political union with the Kingdom of Scotland to create the Kingdom of Great Britain. In 1801, Great Britain was united with the Kingdom of Ireland through another Act of Union to become the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. In 1922, the Irish Free State seceded from the United Kingdom, leading to the latter being renamed the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Toponymy. The name England is derived from the Old English name Engleland, which means land of the Angles. The Angles were one of the Germanic tribes that settled in Great Britain during the early Middle Ages. The Angles came from the Anglian Peninsula in the Bay of Kiel area of the Baltic Sea. The earliest recorded use of the term as England is in the late 9th century translation into Old English of Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People. The term was then used in a different sense to the modern one, meaning the land inhabited by the English, and it included English people in what is now southeast Scotland but was then part of the English Kingdom of Northumbria. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded that the Domesday Book of 1086 covered the whole of England, meaning the English kingdom. But a few years later the Chronicle stated that King Malcolm III went out of Scotland into Lothian in England, thus using it in the more ancient sense. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, its modern spelling was first used in 1538. The earliest attested reference to the Angles occurs in the 1st century work by Tacitus, Germania, in which the Latin word Anglii is used. The etymology of the tribal name itself is disputed by scholars. It has been suggested that it derives from the shape of the Anglian Peninsula, an angular shape, and why a term derived from the name of a tribe that was less significant than others, such as the Saxons, came to be used used for the entire country and its people is not known, but it seems this is related to the custom of calling the Germanic people in Britain Anglo-Saxons or English Saxons. In Scottish Gaelic, another language which developed on the island of Great Britain, the Saxon tribe gave the name to the word for England. Similarly, the Welsh name for the English language is Saesneg. An alternative name for England is Albion. The name Albion originally referred to the entire island of Great Britain. The nominally earliest record of the name appears in the Aristotelian corpus, specifically the 4th century BC de Mundo. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules is the ocean that flows round the earth. In it are two very large islands called Britannia. These are Albion and Ion, but modern scholarly consensus ascribes de Mundo not to Aristotle but to Pseudo-Aristotle, i.e., it was written later in the Greco-Roman period or afterwards. The word Albion or Insula Albionum has two possible origins. It either derives from a cognate of the Latin albus meaning white, a reference to the white cliffs of Dover, the only part of Britain visible from the European continent, or from the phrase the island of the Albiones in the now lost Massiliot Periplus. That is attested through Avianus's Aura Maritima, to which the former presumably served as a source. Albion is now applied to England in a more poetic capacity. Another romantic name for England is Loegria, related to the Welsh word for England, Lea, and made popular by its use in Arthurian legend, history, prehistory and antiquity. The earliest known evidence of human presence in the area now known as England was that of Homo antecessor, dating to approximately 780,000 years ago. The oldest proto-human bones discovered in England date from 500,000 years ago. Modern humans are known to have inhabited the area during the Upper Paleolithic period, though permanent settlements were only established within the last 6,000 years. After the last ice age, only large mammals such as mammoths, bison and woolly rhinoceros remain. Roughly 11,000 years ago, when the ice sheets began to recede, humans repopulated the area. Genetic research suggests they came from the northern part of the Iberian Peninsula. The sea level was lower than now and Britain was connected by a land bridge to Ireland and Eurasia. As the seas rose, it was separated from Ireland 10,000 years ago and from Eurasia 2 millennia later. The beaker culture arrived around 2500 BC, introducing drinking and food vessels constructed from clay, as well as vessels used as reduction pots to smelt copper ores. It was during this time that major Neolithic monuments such as Stonehenge and Avebury were constructed. By heating together tin and copper, which were in abundance in the area, the beaker culture era people made bronze, and later iron from iron ores. The development of iron smelting allowed the construction of better plows, advancing agriculture, as well as the production of more effective weapons. During the Iron Age, Celtic culture, deriving from the Hallstatt and Latin cultures, arrived from Central Europe. Brythonic was the spoken language during this time. Society was tribal. According to Ptolemy's geography, there were around 20 tribes in the area. Earlier divisions are unknown because the Britons were not literate. Like other regions on the edge of the empire, Britain had long enjoyed trading links with the Romans. Julius Caesar of the Roman Republic attempted to invade twice in 55 BC, although largely unsuccessful. He managed to set up a client king from the Trinovantes. The Romans invaded Britain in 43 AD during the reign of Emperor Claudius, subsequently conquering much of Britain, and the area was incorporated into the Roman Empire as Britannia province. The best known of the native tribes who attempted to resist were the Catuvellauni, led by Caratacus. Later, an uprising led by Boudica, queen of the Iceni, ended with Boudicca's suicide following her defeat at the Battle of Watling Street. This era saw a Greco-Roman culture era prevail with the introduction of Roman law, Roman architecture, aqueducts, sewers, many agricultural items and silk. In the 3rd century, Emperor Septimius Severus died at Eboracum, where Constantine was subsequently proclaimed emperor. There is debate about when Christianity was first introduced. It was no later than the 4th century, probably much earlier. According to Bede, missionaries were sent from Rome by Eleutherius at the request of the chieftain Lucius of Britain in 180 AD, to settle differences as to Eastern and Western ceremonials, which were disturbing the Church. There are traditions linked to Glastonbury claiming an introduction through Joseph of Arimathea, while others claim through Lucius of Britain. By 410, during the decline of the Roman Empire, Britain was left exposed by the end of Roman rule in Britain and the withdrawal of Roman army units to defend the frontiers in continental Europe and partake in civil wars. Celtic Christian monastic and missionary movements flourished. Patrick and in the 6th century Brendan, Comgall, David, Aidan and Columba. This period of Christianity was influenced by ancient Celtic culture in its sensibilities, polity, practices and theology. Local congregations were centered in the monastic community and monastic leaders were more like chieftains, as peers, rather than in the more hierarchical system of the Roman-dominated Church. Middle Ages Roman military withdrawals left Britain open to invasion by pagan, seafaring warriors from northwest and continental Europe. Chiefly the Angles, Saxons and Jutes who had long raided the coasts of the Roman province and began to settle, initially in the eastern part of the country. Their advance was contained for some decades after the Britons' victory at the Battle of Mountbatten, but subsequently resumed, overrunning the fertile lowlands of Britain and reducing the area under Brythonic control to a series of separate enclaves in the more rugged country to the west by the end of the 6th century. Contemporary texts describing this period are extremely scarce, giving rise to its description as a dark age. The nature and progression of the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain is consequently subject to considerable disagreement. Roman-dominated Christianity had in general disappeared from the conquered territories, but was reintroduced by missionaries from Rome led by Augustine from 597 onwards. Disputes between the Roman and Celtic-dominated forms of Christianity ended in victory for the Roman tradition at the Council of Whitby, which was ostensibly about haircuts and the date of Easter, but more significantly, about the differences in Roman and Celtic forms of authority, theology, and practice. During the settlement period, the lands ruled by the incomers seem to have been fragmented into numerous tribal territories, but by the 7th century, when substantial evidence of the situation again becomes available, these had coalesced into roughly a dozen kingdoms including Northumbria, Mercia, Wessex, East Anglia, Essex, Kent and Sussex. Over the following centuries this process of political consolidation continued. The 7th century saw a struggle for hegemony between Northumbria and Mercia, which in the 8th century gave way to Mercian preeminence. In the early 9th century Mercia was displaced as the foremost kingdom by Wessex. Later in that century, escalating attacks by the Danes culminated in the conquest of the north and east of England, overthrowing the kingdoms of Northumbria, Mercia and East Anglia. Wessex under Alfred the Great was left as the only surviving English kingdom, and under his successors it steadily expanded at the expense of the kingdoms of the Danelaw. This brought about the political unification of England, first accomplished under Æthelstan in 927 and definitively established after further conflicts by Edred in 953. A fresh wave of Scandinavian Attacks from the late 10th century ended with the conquest of this United Kingdom by Sweyn Forkbeard in 1013 and again by his son Cnut in 1016, turning it into the centre of a short-lived North Sea Empire that also included Denmark and Norway. However, the native royal dynasty was restored with the accession of Edward the Confessor in 1042. A dispute over the succession to Edward led to the Norman conquest of England in 1066, accomplished by an army led by Duke William of Normandy. The Normans themselves originated from Scandinavia and had settled in Normandy in the late 9th and early 10th centuries. This conquest led to the almost total dispossession of the English elite and its replacement by a new French-speaking aristocracy, whose speech had a profound and permanent effect on the English language. Subsequently, the House of Plantagenet from Anjou inherited the English throne under Henry II, adding England to the budding Angevin Empire of fiefs the family had inherited in France, including Aquitaine. They reigned for 3 centuries, some noted monarchs being Richard I, Edward I, Edward III and Henry V. The period saw changes in trade and legislation, including the signing of the Magna Carta, an English legal charter used to limit the sovereign's powers by law and protect the privileges of freemen. Catholic monasticism flourished, providing philosophers, and the universities of Oxford and Cambridge were founded with royal patronage. The Principality of Wales became a Plantagenet fief during the 13th century, and the lordship of Ireland was given to the English monarchy by the Pope. During the 14th century, the Plantagenets and the House of Valois both claimed to be legitimate claimants to the House of Capet, and with it France. The two powers clashed. In the 100 Years' War, the Black Death epidemic hit England. Starting in 1348, it eventually killed up to half of England's inhabitants. From 1453 to 1487, civil war occurred between two branches of the royal family, the Yorkists and Lancastrians, known as the Wars of the Roses. Eventually it led to the Yorkists losing the throne entirely to a Welsh noble family, the Tudors, a branch of the Lancastrians headed by Henry Tudor, who invaded with Welsh and Breton mercenaries, gaining victory at the Battle of Bosworth Field, where the Yorkist King Richard III was killed. Early modern. During the Tudor period, the Renaissance reached England through Italian courtiers, who reintroduced artistic, educational and scholarly debate from classical antiquity. England began to develop naval skills, and exploration to the west intensified. Henry VIII broke from communion with the Catholic Church over issues relating to his divorce, under the Acts of Supremacy in 1534, which proclaimed the monarch head of the Church of England. In contrast with much of European Protestantism, the roots of the split were more political than theological. He also legally incorporated his ancestral land Wales into the Kingdom of England with the 1535 to 1542 Acts. There were internal religious conflicts during the reigns of Henry's daughters, Mary I and Elizabeth I. The former took the country back to Catholicism, while the latter broke from it again, forcefully asserting the supremacy of Anglicanism. Competing with Spain, the first English colony in the Americas was founded in 1585 by explorer Walter Raleigh in Virginia and named Roanoke. The Roanoke colony failed and is known as the Lost Colony, after it was found abandoned on the return of the late arriving supply ship. With the East India Company, England also competed with the Dutch and French in the East. In 1588, during the Elizabethan period, period, an English fleet under Francis Drake defeated an invading Spanish armada. The political structure of the island changed in 1603, when the King of Scots, James VI, a kingdom which was a long-time rival to English interests, inherited the throne of England as James I, creating a personal union. He styled himself King of Great Britain, although this had no basis in English law. Under the auspices of King James VI, the authorized King James version of the Holy Bible was published in 1611. It has not only been ranked, with Shakespeare's works, as the greatest masterpiece of literature in the English language, but also was the standard version of the Bible read by most Protestant Christians for 400 years, until modern revisions were produced in the 20th century, based on conflicting political, religious and social positions. The English Civil War was fought between the supporters of Parliament and those of King Charles I, known colloquially as Roundheads and Cavaliers respectively. This was an interwoven part of the wider multifaceted wars of the three kingdoms, involving Scotland and Ireland. The parliamentarians were victorious. Charles I was executed and the kingdom replaced by the Commonwealth. Leader of the Parliament forces Oliver Cromwell declared himself Lord Protector in 1653. A period of personal rule followed. After Cromwell's death and the resignation of his son Richard as Lord Protector, Charles II was invited to return as monarch in 1660, in a move called the Restoration. After the Glorious Revolution of 1688, it was constitutionally established that King and Parliament should rule together, though Parliament would have the real power. This was established with the Bill of Rights in 1689. Among the statutes set down were that the law could only be made by Parliament and could not be suspended by the King. Also that the King could not impose taxes or raise an army without the prior approval of Parliament. Also, since the time, no British monarch has entered the House of Commons when it is sitting, which is annually commemorated at the state opening of Parliament by the British monarch when the doors of the House of Commons are slammed in the face of the monarch's messenger, symbolizing the rights of Parliament and its independence from the monarch. With the founding of the Royal Society in 1660, science was greatly encouraged. In 1666 the Great Fire of London gutted the City of London, but it was rebuilt shortly afterwards with many significant buildings designed by Sir Christopher Wren. In Parliament two factions had emerged, the Tories and Whigs. Though the Tories initially supported Catholic King James II, some of them, along with the Whigs, during the Revolution of 1688 invited Dutch Prince William of Orange to defeat James and ultimately to become William III of England. Some English people, especially in the north, were Jacobites and continued to support James and his sons. After the Parliaments of England and Scotland agreed, the two countries joined in political union to create the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707. To accommodate the union, institutions such as the law and national churches of each remained separate, late modern and contemporary under the newly formed Kingdom of Great Britain. Output from the Royal Society and other English initiatives combined with the Scottish Enlightenment to create innovations in science and engineering, while the enormous growth in British overseas trade protected by the Royal Navy paved the way for the establishment of the British Empire. Domestically, it drove the Industrial Revolution, a period of profound change in the socio-economic and cultural conditions of England, resulting in industrialized agriculture, manufacture, engineering and mining, as well as new and pioneering road, rail and water networks to facilitate their expansion and development. The opening of northwest England's Bridgewater Canal in 1761 ushered in the Canal Age in Britain. In 1825 the world's first permanent steam locomotive-hauled passenger railway, the Stockton and Darlington Railway, opened to the public. During the Industrial Revolution, many workers moved from England's countryside to new and expanding urban industrial areas to work in factories. For instance, at Manchester and Birmingham, dubbed warehouse city and workshop of the world respectively. England maintained relative stability throughout the French Revolution. William Pitt the Younger was British Prime Minister for the reign of George III. During the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon planned to invade from the southeast. However, this failed to manifest, and the Napoleonic forces were defeated by the British at sea by Lord Nelson and on land by the Duke of Wellington. The Napoleonic Wars fostered a concept of Britishness and a united national British people, shared with the Scots and Welsh. London became the largest and most populous metropolitan area in the world during the Victorian era, and trade within the British Empire, as well as the standing of the British military and navy, was prestigious. Political agitation at home from radicals such as the Chartists and the suffragettes enabled legislative reform and universal suffrage. Power shifts in East Central Europe led to World War I. Hundreds of thousands of English soldiers died fighting for the United Kingdom as part of the Allies. 2 decades later, in World War II, the United Kingdom was again one of the Allies. At the end of the Phoney War, Winston Churchill became the wartime Prime Minister. Developments in warfare technology saw many cities damaged by air raids during the Blitz. Following the war, the British Empire experienced rapid decolonization, and there was a speeding up of technological innovations. Automobiles became the primary means of transport, and Frank Whittle's development of the jet engine led to wider air travel. Residential patterns were altered in England by private motoring, and by the creation of the National Health Service in 1948. The UK's NHS provided publicly funded healthcare to all UK permanent residents free, at the point of need, being paid for from general taxation. Combined, these changes prompted the reform of local government in England in the mid-20th century. Since the 20th century, there has been significant population movement to England, mostly from other parts of the British Isles, but also from the Commonwealth, particularly the Indian subcontinent. Since the 1970s, there has been a large move away from manufacturing and an increasing emphasis on the service industry. As part of the United Kingdom, the area joined a common market initiative called the European Economic Community, which became the European Union. Since the late 20th century, the administration of the United Kingdom has moved towards devolved governance in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. England and Wales continues to exist as a jurisdiction within the United Kingdom. Devolution has stimulated a greater emphasis on a more English-specific identity and patriotism. There is no devolved English government, but an attempt to create a similar system on a sub-regional basis was rejected by referendum.